Today, Russia-Africa summit will kick off in Vladimir Putin's hometown, St Petersburg, on Thursday. It aims at creating and maintaining mutually beneficial cooperation and partnerships between the Russian Federation and the African continent. African leaders, including President Matamela Ramaphosa, will also be discussing peace initiatives in a bid to end the war in Ukraine. Professor David Monyae is a director at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. He's also an international relations expert. He joins me now to discuss the significance of this Africa-Russia-Africa summit this week. Prof, good afternoon. Welcome, and thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I mean, at a broader level, at a high level, how important is this summit?
It is important. I think for Africa, Africa has strategic partnership, not just with Russia Federation. It has strategic relationship with China, Europe, United States, Japan, all important global players. And I think it is within that context that in light of ongoing conflict, and the importance of Russia as United Nations Security Council member, a strategic partner in the past in terms of the role that Russia had always played on the African continent. And therefore, I think this summit will bring all those issues, and good and bad issues will be discussed, and perhaps find a common position that benefits both parties.
Yeah, but are things normal, really? I mean, regarding Russia, I'm talking in the context of the Russia-Ukraine conflict at the moment. Russia is dealing with sanctions by the West in terms of that conflict. African leaders, led by our president, were in Moscow not so long ago trying to mediate and offer their services. I mean, this summit is coming at a time when things are not that normal.
Indeed. But I think the key role for South Africa and the rest of the continent is that in times like this, you cannot isolate a player such as Russia. Russia is deeply involved on our continent in terms of economy, in terms of conflict areas. Also, it's a player at a global level where core issues pertaining to peace and security on our continent is concerned. And Russia has a voice right there. And therefore, it is in that context that I think for South Africa and the AU, of the view that we need to engage to ensure that you bring peace to Ukraine matter. And therefore, the closeness, I think those are some of those issues.
Yeah, I mean,
that will be discussed.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have 43 African heads of state, I understand, who will be attending. I mean, they in 2019, 43 African heads of state attended the first such summit. Do you think, away from the peace and security and geopolitical security situation, do you think in matters of trade, for example, should top the agenda? I mean, because Africa has got a lot, African countries and ourselves here, we've got a lot to offer to Russia.
Yes, and Russia has also more to offer to us. Russia has a lot of skills in a number of areas that lacks on our continent. When it comes to blue economy, how to deal with mining, I think they're big in mining. They're also big on energy, issues of energy. As you know, they do have a nuclear and the ability to use nuclear for peaceful purposes. So those are some of the issues. When it comes to space, Russia is in the top 3. So these are some of issues that Africa is looking for, defined within the AU Agenda 2063, the need to get assistance from all strategic players, Russia included. Unfortunately, this comes at a terrible time, and within that, I think it will be important for the African continent to ensure that that conflict does not disturb the African continent. The grain issue, which is a core issue that we still need a movement, avoid the disruption of global value chain, particularly in food. That is so vital for the African continent. And those are some of those issues that President Putin and African leaders will exchange views and find a common position on some of them.
Yeah, it is very interesting that since 2019, when there was a big amount of investment and trade between the two countries, it has sort of declined, and Russia is investing very little on the continent, and maybe they are looking now for new opportunities. What would success look like for you when we look at this summit from Friday, after it has ended? What should we be looking for, Prof, to say, wow, it was successful and it will benefit Africa and South Africa included?
I think what is key for Africa is to what extent can Russia open up access for Africans to access grain, food, but beyond food, the kind of assistance that Russia would play in key areas, training in those strategic areas that Africa lacks. But far beyond that, opening in terms of investments in key and strategic areas, and ensure, more importantly, much more controversial issues, the role played by Russian mercenaries, the Wagner Group on the African continent, Central Africa and a number of other areas, in Mali and others, that it should be done in a manner that does not destabilize the continent. So I think that is critical for African leaders to express to President Putin that involvement of Russia should not come at the expense of the continent.
Thank you very much. Professor David Monyae, the Director of the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg, also an international relations expert, just weighing in there ahead of this week's second summit between Russia and Africa. It will be kicking off in St Petersburg on Thursday, and our very own head of state, Matamela Ramaphosa, will be attending it.